who is really running this country? That's a question that we all need to ask ourselves, because the answer might actually shock us. It seems like more and more everyday Americans are losing control of their government, the very government that was meant to serve us. The founding fathers envisioned a nation where power came from the people, not from bureaucrats, not from the special interest groups, and certainly not from global elites. And it's up to us to make sure that that vision lives on. A lot of people for a long time thought maybe it's just the president that controls everything. However, we've all been awakened to the reality that that's probably not the case at all. So who is it? What is their motive? Whoever it is, we have seen that they don't want Donald Trump on the inside. How many times have they tried to kill him now? Who's involved? What are they doing? Who is running our government? That's the question that I'm going to try to answer tonight. And got my beautiful wife with me here. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I don't think we will get to the bottom of this before this podcast is over. What do you think?
Probably not.
We probably won't get to the bottom of it, but there are a lot of things that I think it's important that we discuss, especially with the election coming up, about our government, how it works. And I want to talk about how, from a high level standpoint, so looking at the federal level, and then maybe a little more behind the scenes insight of what actually happens at the state level, things that I've seen, things I had no idea about before I went into the legislature. But you've been able to be up there with me a lot, which is by intention. I take you with me because I like having you with me. You're supposed to say, "Aw."
And I make you behave.
That's right. And so you've got to see a lot of things happen. You've seen a lot of the battles that I have been involved in behind the scenes. And my eyes have been open to a lot of things that I just had no clue about. Things that I thought just happened, or I had a preconceived idea as to how they happened. But I have found out that it's not that way at all. It's not the case. I'm just a bill on a hill, the little song that the kids used to sit around and sing, and the video that went with it, I think there was a cartoonish video or something that was made. And the process of, you just, a legislator files a bill, that bill goes into a committee, and then it goes from the committee to the floor in the House, and then goes from the House to the Senate, and then the Senate blesses it and in the committee, and then sends it to the floor, and then it comes back, if there's no changes made to it, heads to the governor's desk. The governor just signs it, and it's over with.
If it were only that simple.
I know it.
Ignorance is bliss at times. And when you're busy living life, sometimes you think that is the process that happens. I think one thing that came out of the Biden administration was the fact that every American now knows that the president is not running the country and calling the shots. I think that was made more, people were made more aware of that this time around. And so that opens up to, in the legislative process in our state, on a state level, you don't just send your representative up there and he can just pass all this legislation and it's just a smooth sailing, easy process. We've learned that that's not the case.
Well, this is the thing from a presidential standpoint. It makes you wonder, how long has there been other things involved in, and I know that when it comes to governance, that it is meant to be hard to pass legislation, to get buy-in, to make laws, things of that nature. I have actually suggested that we spend the off-year session, when we're not doing the budget, that we actually spend that entire session doing nothing but repealing laws. Yeah. and doing away with red tape. And so I've suggested that, but it was meant to not be easy to get legislation through to some degree. But with the Biden administration, it's been so clear, it's been so plain, especially in the last 6 months, with them forming the coup, getting him out, Kamala coming in and taking over as the nominee for the party.
And how did that happen? No votes from the people.
Well, that's the thing. I think that's the point that we're going to make tonight, is that there's so much more behind the scenes and a system that is at work. And we'll talk about 3 different things, because there's no question legislators have influence. So there's the legislative body that has influence. There is corporate structure that has influence. And then there is this administrative structure that has blossomed over the last several decades. It has greatly grown. And there's a lot that I'd like to say about that. But first of all, let's talk about the legislative process. So the process would be that myself as a legislator or a citizen would come and advocate for a cause, for something that they need in legislation. We work with bill drafters. We will have that bill drafted, and then we introduce that bill on the House floor. So we file that bill, and once that is done, it's made public to the people so that they can see it on the website. On a federal level, it's basically happens the exact same way. So anybody can file any type of bill. But when it comes to the legislative process, there is definitely a hierarchy of control that is built into it, and probably was never intended to be the way that it is, as far as from the founder's perspective. And we also know that there are individuals that have much more power than other legislators.
Right. So that would be leadership, right?
Correct.
And you have in that leadership, you have the Speaker of the House.
Correct.
Speaker Pro Tem.
Correct.
The whip.
Yes. The caucus chair.
Caucus chair.
And then the floor leader.
The floor leader. Okay. Yeah.
So at the state level, those are the 5 people in each caucus, so in each party, that are elected by the people in the caucus. So legislators elect their representation in leadership.
Okay.
And so those 5 people basically help set the tone. They set the guidance for the caucus, and what bills are going to be heard, how the committees are structured. It's laid out in our rules specifically as to what their responsibilities are. And this is the thing I think maybe people don't understand, but specifically at the state level, the Speaker of the House, especially in the majority party, and the President of the Senate, which they have the same 5-person leadership structure, those 2 individuals are extremely powerful. As a matter of fact, in a state like Kentucky, where we have a supermajority, we have a Democrat governor, those 2 individuals have more power to some degree. When it comes to legislation, they have more power than the governor has.
Right. And a lot of people don't realize that. And they think that when you sign up to run, if you're going to campaign and go up there, you have all these ideas. And that when you get up to Frankfurt, you have just as much say as anybody else. But you're 1 in 100. And there's an order of operation that you learn really quick.
Exactly. So in our rules, as far as the House goes, the Speaker determines basically every chairperson of a committee. Mm-hmm. He determines who goes on those committees, working through the leadership team, but he has the ultimate say in that. And he has primarily the ultimate say when it comes to any bill that gets assigned to committee and any bill that comes to the floor. that is a lot of concentrated power. And I think sometimes that maybe the public doesn't understand that, and that's why we're doing this. I
know that I didn't understand that.
I didn't understand that. So in my mind, I was one of 100, but inside of that one of 100, there's still a structure, and there's still a force, a power that is concentrated at the top, and then after you have that leadership structure, so the Speaker of the House, those other people that are a part of the leadership team, then you have committee chairs who have a lot of latitude. They have a lot of power when it comes to what legislation that they want brought into their committee, what they don't want brought into their committee. And there is some trade-off for that, right?
Right.
So in order to be a chairman, sometimes I know, especially at a federal level, there are probably specific things that they have to guarantee they won't do, or things that they will do. There is a trade-off sometimes for what you really want to see accomplished, understanding that if I take this role, I take this position, I may lose a little bit of autonomy, but I might have more voice, or, some more power to advocate for specific things.
So who decided that the Speaker of the House or the President of the Senate would have so much power? Because a lot of people don't realize that they're representative just like you, but they have the final say. Where did that come from?
Well, there's a couple things, and I was referred to that a little bit ago, but part of it was from the founding of the Constitution. It was intentional to have to work together to get legislation passed. Yeah. So there was an intent that a person would have to develop relationships and work with their colleagues in order to move legislation. But there was also an intent to be able to represent your district and the people that have placed you into office. And so when it comes to legislation, there's one rule. I tried to invoke it last session. It didn't work for me. But that just basically says, if any piece of legislation has been held for an unreasonable amount of time, that any member during motions, petitions, and communications, which is part of the legislative session, could call that bill and bring it to the floor for a vote. They disagreed that it meant what I thought that it meant. And I'm just saying that because I want people to understand that there is a process and there is a hierarchy of structure and power and control. And so what a legislator has to do, one is they have to, as soon as they get there, they have to decide whether or not they're going to stand on principle.
Right.
They have to make that decision and what that means to them. And you begin to establish those relationships, and you begin to work inside of the system and find ways to advance good legislation and to block bad legislation. So I guess the thing that maybe people don't understand is that inside of this structure of power, so the leadership team, specifically the Speaker and the President, inside of that, there are other controlling interest, right? So we have the legislative body. That's kind of how it works. And then you have these corporations, I like to call them. It's not just corporations, but globalist, elitist people with a lot of money. Inside of that, I would put lobbyists that advocate for certain causes or for certain companies. You have companies with a lot of money. And so what they do is they're very sharp on what they do. Most of the time, they don't begin legislate or working with or lobbying us, the legislators, they usually start with the leadership team.
Right.
And there's reasons why they do that.
Because money matters.
Because money does matter. And a lot of times I think people think that there's all kind of money that's being handed under the table. And does it go on? Absolutely, it does go on. But it's not always about that. Sometimes it's just about your campaign. It's about knowing that you'll be well funded in your campaign, whether if you decide to run, if someone challenges you and you are in a hot race, that you have money that's coming to your aid, because money makes a difference when it comes to campaigning.
And we've seen that this election cycle, where you have had different groups that have put money against you. There were several legislators that there's been thousands of dollars with different special interest groups trying to get them out of office. And so the money does matter. And you can have the best message. You can be conservative. You can be for the people. But the money trail, it talks. I mean, it makes a big impact.
Right. So incumbency matters when it comes to an election. It is hard to beat an incumbent, but money matters. And it also, you can see who is supporting who. So you can kind of see the direction of what these groups, how they want the state to move forward, or what policy they want advanced. You can see that by who they put their money behind and where they put their money. For instance, it blows my mind that the Jefferson County Teachers Union would be putting money to try to get me defeated, as if we want our public schools to look like the Jefferson County schools.
Right.
So you can see where people are advocating and where they put their money, and it gives you an idea about those specific people. Some of us have advocated for school choice, and multiple legislators that advocated for school choice, they ended up having primary challengers. They had Democrat challengers, and their primary challengers and their Democrat challengers were funded by the Jefferson County Teachers Union.
Right. How many were actually challenged? Do you know that number?
I think that number was 7. I think it was 7, if I remember correct. So you had one race that wasn't, it was an open seat. And then you had several other races that there was somebody that challenged them in the primary. My race in particular had people were recruiting other people to run against me. And
there's some interesting stories with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so just helping people understand that there's a lot more that goes into it than just a name's on the ballot and you go vote for that person gets elected, and they head straight to Frankfurt or straight to Washington, D.C., and they file legislation, and everybody loves them, and they get bills passed, and they make a difference. And those days, maybe they existed to some degree, but they are long gone.
So you actually have some representatives that never carry any bills themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because they've not fallen in line. Maybe they've rubbed somebody the wrong way. Maybe they've questioned some things. And so it's not guaranteed. I have a few in mind right now that I know they've not been able to pass any legislation. That doesn't mean that they're not effective.
Right.
Because there's a lot of behind the scenes things that can go on, and you can add amendments, and you can work with different groups to still pass good legislation. And you can also bring to light some things that are going on. I know that a lot of people have come to me, have asked you and said, why are they not passing this? We have a super majority. We're a super majority. This should not be an issue. It is an issue.
Right.
And sometimes they don't want any controversy because that brings out media, that brings out protesters, when the gallery's full, people are nervous.
Right.
Because they don't know what's going to be said, how it's going to go. They want to have a good idea of how things are going to go. And if you have somebody that upsets that, then that's typically who has a primary and a general. And
sometimes it's not just those things, but it's the retaliation and the retribution that comes as a result of upsetting the apple cart.
Kind of like junior high.
Correct.
Petty.
Very
petty.
I heard somebody say today, I won't call their name, but they were talking to someone who had won their primary and they do not have a challenger on the ballot for November the 5th. And this individual told the other individual, asked them, are you ready for the session to get started? And this individual said, I think so. And he said, well, let me ask you a question. He said, did you go to middle school? And this person said, I sure did. He said, then you're absolutely ready to go.
Welcome back. That's what it's like sometimes.
And we laugh about that, but the seriousness of it is that the representative government that our founders had envisioned is something that we have to constantly protect. And we have to be looking at ways to make sure that the people's voice is heard.
So how can you ensure that for a representative that doesn't get to put any legislation on the floor?
We'll get there in a little bit.
Okay.
I want to talk about that at the end. So we talked about the legislative body, who is a force that helps govern this country, this state. We talked about corporations, and there are other groups as well that are involved in that from a lobbyist standpoint that try to influence public policy, think tanks and the Chamber of Commerce and groups like that are involved in legislation, very heavily involved in legislation. And then before I move on from that, this is what I would challenge people to do. If you want to see a lot about who has influence, show up on the final day of session.
Okay.
When all the controversial stuff has been passed, and see who's there.
Lobbyist.
You won't see the citizens there. You don't see citizen groups there advocating for things most of the time, because if it's controversial, it's already been passed, especially on a state level, because we have this veto period, right?
Right.
So we pass legislation. The governor has 10 days to veto anything that we pass, or he can sign it into law, or he can do nothing and it automatically goes into law and gets enrolled. So what happens, you get through that period. If we have anything that we think we need veto proof, we get that passed before that period of time. Then we come back and usually have a couple days that we clean up, finish up, and do whatever it is, override the governor's vetoes, which we kind of enjoy doing. But we get all that done, and there will be 40 or 50 lobbyists walking around in and out of offices.
Maybe they just want to say farewell for the session.
I think that's what they're doing.
I think so too.
They want to tell everybody bye because they're not going to get to see them consistently for a while. Or it could be that they have legislation that they're very interested in, and they want to make sure it gets shepherded through. And I would say that some of those groups, they have a place. If they're not taxpayer funded, some of them have a place. They bring good resources. They bring good research to us. They're think tanks and people that do a lot of research, and we're able to glean from that, and we're able to take that information and make good decisions on it. But most of the time, that's not the case. Most of the time there's an interest, and they want to make sure that their interest gets met for their clients or for their business or for whoever it is that they're representing.
Right.
And so I would challenge people to do that. Then we step into what I call the administrative state. Those are people that are not elected, who work inside of government. A lot of them are good public servants. They're people that love their country or they love their state. But there is a group of people inside of the administrative state that holds tons of power.
Like who?
Well, if you think about the 3-letter agencies, right? So
Who? WHO?
Well, at a U.S. level,
Okay.
So you have the EPA,
Okay.
you have the FBI, you have the Department of Education.
Okay.
All of these are administrations that are under, most of the time, the heads are under the appointment of the governor or of the president.
Right.
They serve at their pleasure, and they are meant to help implement the laws that we pass. So we will pass a law that says that we're going to do thus and so, and then it goes to the respective agency, and then they create regulations that will, what are called administrative regs, that will help implement whatever the law is that we passed. And what we have seen is a massive growth among the administrative state. These are people, especially at a federal level, that are making laws
that are not elected.
Okay. And not just making laws that are not elected, but many of them can't be fired. So they have protection against being fired, because a lot of times, what would happen, a new administration would come in, they would empty every office out, hire their buddies or their people, and to some degree, they have some latitude to do that with some of the top positions. But these people that are inside and entrenched into the government, they are protected from that. And many of them wield all kinds of power. I'll give you a good example from a Frankfurt standpoint. There are people that work and help do research and help guide committees there that have been there for 20, 25 years. They have tons of knowledge, but I have seen them literally kill bills or advance bills just because they have met with lobbyists, they sit down with leadership, and they advocate, this is a good bill, this does this, I've talked to all these people, or have a bill that somebody really cared about that was really good policy, and them be able to say, oh, I talked to so-and-so in this part of the administration, and it's not going to work, and it died just like that. Not elected. And so they have that kind of power.
And they can't be fired?
They can't be fired for much.
Okay.
And
who puts them in the position that they're in?
Most of them are hired through these branches of agency.
Was appointed?
Correct.
Okay.
So they're hired through that, and then some of them have been through multiple administrations. But they develop regulations, and they will implement a law, give administrative regs, put fines and penalties with those administrative regs to where if you, the citizen, don't follow that, you will be fined or penalized.
And they're not lawmakers.
And that is why that we have seen a lot of these cases, the Chevron case that came about, which was huge. It was massive for this country to see that overturned, because they are not representatives of the people. So they don't get to be elected. They're not elected, so they shouldn't have the ability to be able to make laws. And that is where we get a lot of our government overreach from.
How can we fix that?
I think one way that we can fix it is to be honest, we only have one person running for office that has committed to go in and deal with it. I think it's one of the reasons why that there is so much turmoil over this particular election, because there are people that are literally fighting for their political life. And Donald Trump has said that he would go in and deal with these administrative regs. Vivek Ramaswamy campaigned on that. He said, I will eliminate 75% of the government if you elect me, and I have a plan to do so. And
his plan is pretty good.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I heard him lay out some of his plan, and he will probably serve somewhere in the Trump administration, and there's things I disagree with him on. But what he understands about how that administrative state works and the power that they wield and how that they use that, they have weaponized that. Just think about what the FBI has done to political people.
Right, yeah.
They have literally used a branch of the government of unelected people to persecute their political enemies.
And cover up for others.
Exactly right. So and the problem with that is that you not only get them wielding power that they weren't given by the people, but it's imbalanced power.
And so I think something that people need to realize, that I had to realize, when you are electing your president or your governor, it's not just about that person, but it's about people that they can put in place that will have that trickle-down effect as far as appointed people in positions. For instance, what Donald Trump did with the Supreme Court, the people that are on.
Correct.
Putting people that they can do in those organizations like the Department of Education and different things. It's important that you have the right person as president to be able to make those appointments that would affect us.
Right. I would go all the way back to before Trump was elected the first time.
Okay.
And I would be the first to say that there's things about Trump that I don't like. I'm sure there'd be things about me that he wouldn't like. We are not trying to find the person that we like the most. We are looking for the person that will lead the best. So that is what you have to keep in mind. But if you go all the way back to before he was elected, regardless of how people feel about Senator McConnell, he made a decision. There was a Supreme Court justice position that was open. Merrick Garland had been nominated for that position, and he said, we're going to let the American people decide who gets to appoint this individual, and he held his ground. That decision made a lot of things come to light for people to understand how important that presidential pick was.
Right.
And there were people that specifically voted for him because they knew that he was going to get to appoint that Supreme Court justice.
Right.
And so I think that maybe people sometimes we don't think about the big picture, how that everything about the administration is important. In the state of Kentucky, for instance, there were people that, because we have a supermajority, one, they automatically thought we should be able to pass conservative legislation.
Right.
Shouldn't be a problem. And we've discussed a little bit about why that's a problem. But they also thought because we had a supermajority that the governor's race was not that important. Maybe they didn't engage in it because we're protected. We've got a legislature that can pass anything they want. But when you realize all of the appointments that those individuals have to the administrative state and how those things affect our life.
Right. Our daily lives, yes.
So imagine if one of the richest men in the world showed up at your door and knocked on your door and said, give me $5,000.
I would say no.
Exactly. You wouldn't think twice about it.
Right.
no matter who it was. If it was Elon Musk, if it was Jeff Bezos, it wouldn't matter who it was, you would say no. But if somebody from the EPA or the IRS showed up at your door and knocked on your door, many people would be afraid.
Because they have power to punish you.
Exactly.
Who gives them the power?
And that's the problem. It's not the people. It's something that we need to deal with at a state level. It is something that is so out of control at a federal level. I've met with Senator Paul today, and we were just discussing some things about the state and about the nation, and he's someone that has absolutely seen it. We talked to him today about filing the REINS Act, which has been filed in Congress several times, but it's basically to deal with the administrative regs. And this is what Representative Massaroni and myself intend to do. She will be reelected. She doesn't have an opponent, but I do. But if reelected, we are going to work on that in this next session, because we should get to vote on those regs. There should be no law that is put on the people. If it has an impact on their life, we should be able to look at those and decide if they are just or if they are not, as the representatives of the people.
And there's no oversight with that right now as far as the legislative body. There
is, to some degree. We have a couple committees that do reg oversight, and if it's, for instance, the Education Committee, we get those regs back through just to look over them. We don't vote on them. We look over them. They get approved. We have contract review, to where the administrative state, again, makes these contracts, and then the contract review is basically just saying this is just or it's not, it's an unjust spending. But either way, it gets approved and it moves on because of the power that those positions have. And so we need to pull that in. We've got to pull that in. When you look at what is happening with these ladies that are standing outside of abortion clinics and just simply standing there and praying.
And getting arrested?
And getting arrested for doing so.
Peaceful protest, getting arrested.
Exactly. So the overreach is out of control. But this is the state of our country. This is where we are at. So you have the legislative body, you have what I call the corporate interest, and then you have this administrative state. And there are people behind the scenes that are involved in each of these branches, if you will, that are making decisions that affect our life.
And I think that the behind the scenes is what a lot of people don't understand, don't fully understand about that, and how much there is going on behind the scenes. What you see presented to you is not the clear picture.
Right. And I would tell people that if you have a legislator that represents you, that stands on principle, stick with them. Stick with them, because those people are much, much more effective than you realize, especially if you have family values and your faith is important to you and principle is important to you. If the Constitution is important to you, if your First Amendment, your Second Amendment is important to you, if they will stand on principle and stand firm, stick with them. You have seen just a little bit from my standpoint what it is like sometimes, the pressure to give in, the pressure to bend, the pressure to bow, the pressure to compromise on your principles.
And some do it really fast. there's been some legislators that have come in, and I thought they were solid. They've got this. They're gonna stand, and I still don't know what happened to change their mind, but they're silent. They go along to get along, and that's not effective. That was never the intent for lawmakers to go up there and be passive or just to agree with everything. You're the voice for your people, and some people just go silent.
Well, you think about how we got here, and you just said it. It was in my mind. You must read my mind. Maybe we've been 25 years might do that to you.
It's actually 26.
Well, I know, but you think about what you just said, but how did we get here? I hear people a lot of times talk about how do we get back to getting along? How do we pull this country together? But the reason that we got in the condition we are in is not because of the radical right or the crazy left. It's because of passive people that kept their mouths shut while freedoms were being taken, while they were being run over top of, and they didn't want to upset anything or upset anybody, or we'll wait and see how this pans out. And before you know it, we have an administrative state that is pushing regulations down our throat. We have legislators that are getting bought off and picked off by lobbyists. You have this corporation structure that is absolutely having their way because of the money that they are pumping into this, and people are losing their freedom. We had 40 million so-called quote-unquote evangelicals that it was said did not vote in our last election.
That's terrible.
The passiveness, the silence, and that is how we got here. People want to talk about how woke the education system has gotten, but where were these people at when they took prayer out of the schools?
So where did the idea come from to not say anything or to not stir the pot or ruffle feathers or whatever term you want to use there?
Well, I think
because I've had some people just in Frankfurt tell me, you may want to talk to Josh, and he's stirring the pot, and if he will ease his way into things. But what has that done for them?
Well, this is the thing. A couple things I would say to that. One is we weren't doing as bad as we're doing now before they started chopping little kids' body parts off. Before they started killing babies up to the point of birth. There's some things that you can't come together over some of those things.
And somebody has to be a voice and say that is actually happening, because if you're passive, they will just cover it up with, it's not happening here. Nobody, I heard maybe Kamala Harris, nobody wants late-term abortions. Pretty sure it was her, so I could be wrong. But nobody wants late-term abortions. But they do, and they're happening.
That's right. 13, 14 states that have no restrictions up to the point of birth.
And if the baby survives the abortion, they cannot render aid.
Exactly. So there's some...
So passiveness doesn't do anything on those situations.
Correct. There's some specific things that we can't come together on.
Right.
We just have to take a stand on, and we have to fight back. But some of it, I think, happened kind of like the old phrase, getting used to the dark. It just happened over time. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't that big of a deal. Maybe it wasn't worth going and protesting over. Maybe it wasn't worth picking up the phone and calling their legislator over. Maybe it wasn't worth campaigning over. And so they just, through over time, just gradually we got worse and worse into the place now to where a lot of people are waking up and saying, how did we get here?
And they're overwhelmed because there's not a seemingly quick fix. There's a lot that you would have to undo and work to take back.
Exactly. And you have to be strategic. We have to be strategic in what we do. And people would be surprised who I've worked with in legislation to get it passed, and the things that people would never dream probably that we could come together. But if we can come together on good policy, then let's come together on it. But we cannot let our country be taken over and head down this path of Marxism and communism without saying something about it and understanding that we're not just saying something about it, but it's urgent.
Yes.
We don't have a lot of time to turn this around. And I'm not one that puts all the stock in that, well, if we get this president elected or we get this person elected, that it's going to change. If Donald Trump does not get elected, I promise you, we are in for the fight of our lives. But if he does get elected and we just lay down,
right,
and 2028 is coming right back. And the other thing is that he's not the total fix and the total answer. And we understand from a spiritual perspective, I know that our nation needs God. There's no question about it. We need to see a revival, and we need people to turn back to God. We desperately need that.
Yes.
But when it comes to the preservation of constitutional principles and of morality, we have to stand up. We have to speak up. We have to make sure that we let people know this is urgent.
Yes. And you have to vote. You have to encourage people to vote. And you have to encourage people to get involved in their own communities.
Mm-hmm.
All from the very local community to your state, federal level, it all matters. And I think a lot of times we've let other people do those things for us. And it's time for everybody to do their part, to be on the city council, to be the mayor, to be on the school boards, and go from there.
Right.
We all need to put ourselves in the seat.
And that's the thing I think that I had come to is keep your head down, raise your family, enjoy life, do what we do, and just leave them alone, let them leave us alone. But if good people do not get in these positions, there's a good chance that evil people will.
They will. And if we don't win this election, I don't think we'll have another election. It's that serious. To me, it's that serious.
Yeah.
Because they've taken over everything. They're trying to take over everything and regulate and say what you can do. So it's really important that everybody gets out and votes.
Correct. And when we talk about all these things that seem insurmountable, how do you fix this? How do you take care of this? I think that it starts with an individual. It starts with you. It starts with me. And then it extends to our family. I think that one thing that would make a massive difference in our nation is if we expanded good, strong, moral families.
Yes.
And I've said it several times. I talk about the grandkids a lot, It's
easy to do.
What you do when you're a granddad. You talk about your grandkids because they're the greatest thing ever. They're much better than kids.
If you could only had them first.
Exactly. But the gravity of seeing them, they're three, two of them are three, two of them are one, and looking at them and looking at where we have come just in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
If I started naming things, if I would have said just 10 years ago that men's going to be going in women's bathrooms.
Right.
If I would have said that men's going to be playing in women's sports.
And fighting women.
Oh, yeah. That men could become women and women could become men.
Did anybody come to her aid in that fight? That's what I want to know. I didn't watch it. I just read about it. Did anybody?
Well, this is the thing. There were people that spoke out about it, but I've made that same statement with in regard to Riley Gaines when she talks about what she went through and what she was exposed to, and I had said, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for the advocacy that you're doing, but where are the men?
Exactly.
Where were the men in her world that were around that situation that to say, this is not happening. This is not going on. But we never dreamed that we would get to where we are. And just in the last 10 years, it has been expedited.
Right.
Where will we be 10 years from now? What about when those boys are 13 and when they're 11?
Right.
What kind of country will they be in? What will they be faced with when they're moving into their career, when they are looking for a spouse?
Right.
When they're just trying to live their life, go to church, have a good family. You know, the things have changed so much just in the last 10 years. And we need some people to say enough is enough. And you can do that with character.
Yes.
You can do that in a way that is respectful.
Yes.
But you cannot do that and be passive.
Right.
You have to take a stand.
You do. And just looking at, talking about the grand boys and what they will face, puts the urgency to us because we've seen what has changed and what could possibly happen.
Yeah.
I don't even think we can imagine where we could be because where we're at right now, sometimes it's hard for me to process
Right.
that's happened so quickly. But that's why it's so important that you talk to people about running and putting people in those positions to help the future generation. It's not just about, it's us right now. It's looking forward to that future generation.
I could put it this way. If you were to ask me what is the answer, and not go into a philosophical answer, we know the answer with Jesus is coming back, revival, all those things. But I would sum it up in this. You are the answer. If you want things to change, you have to change. Your mindset has to change. We know people are getting involved in city council races that have never been involved in politics before. And it's not for everybody.
Right.
If you're thin-skinned, it's definitely not for you.
Yes.
The attacks are going to come. If you stand on principle, the attacks are going to come. People will make up stuff about you.
Outrageous things.
Oh, yeah.
Make up.
Exactly. They'll make up things about you. They will twist your words. They take votes that you made and turn them into something that they are not, or they don't explain the whole story, or they create the narrative that they want. All of those things happen. They don't matter. What matters is doing right, protecting the Constitution, protecting a moral society that my grandkids can raise their kids in and know the freedom that we have.
Yes. Yes. And that's what people need to do. They need to put their name on the ballot. Good conservative people need to put their name on the ballot and take a stand and just, you may not make any progress at first. You may feel defeated or discouraged, but just standing so you're not losing ground is a pretty big deal too.
It absolutely is. Yeah. And sometimes it's not about what we advance, but it's about what we block.
Yes.
That is very important.
And I think if some people knew that too, talking earlier about behind the scenes, if you knew some of the things that were going to be voted on or tucked in to a clause amendment, different things, and how those things get stopped by behind the scenes things, you would be amazed. And sometimes, I think the public should be made aware to an extent that they don't realize some of the stuff that you all prevent from happening. You may not be getting anything through, but some of the things that you are preventing are just as big of a deal.
Exactly. So engage, do your part, and we didn't get here overnight. We're not going to change things overnight, but we can make a difference. You as an individual can make a difference. And make sure, look at your representative, hold them accountable to principle, and make sure that you have somebody sitting in that seat that is representing the values, the morals, the future that you want for your kids and your grandkids to be a part of. If we keep that futuristic view, if we are constantly looking forward saying, how is this going to preserve the freedom that we were given by God and given through the Constitution? If we look at legislation as to how is it going to preserve that for my kids, my grandkids, other people's kids and grandkids, we'll come to the right conclusion. It won't matter about pressure. It won't matter about what gets made up about you. Principle.
Yes.
Principle is what matters. So you got to stand on it. So who's running the government? I don't really know.
Not Joe Biden.
It's definitely not Joe Biden.
And it won't be Donald Trump single-handedly.
Right.
But he is a force to be reckoned with. So I do think he has some say in some things and can change some things that whoever is running it, we can work on getting better people, doing away with some things, trying to figure some things out.
Do you think it could be Obama?
I think so. Sometimes I get confused and say Joe Biden,
Well, we know Kamala's not running it.
No.
She definitely has flip-flopped on her positions.
If she doesn't have a teleprompter, if she loses her place, I don't even know what she's saying. That's pretty bad.
Well, this is what she did say, just so people don't forget. She did say in 2019 that she supported taxpayers paying for gender transitions for illegals that were locked up. She did say that.
She did say that.
She also did say that she supported a mandatory gun buyback. She did say that she felt like that media should be censored.
And she also said that she wouldn't change anything that Joe Biden did.
That's right.
And apparently she has not been to the grocery store because that is affecting a lot of people. Just the inflation is a huge issue for your regular, everyday Americans, middle class. What I could buy for $125 when Donald Trump was in office, it's close to $250, $275. That's a big deal. And she said she wouldn't change that. That makes me not want to vote for her. I'm probably not going to vote for her.
Well, we know she's not running things either. So
ultimately, God is in control. And we know the big picture that he is in control. But that doesn't mean that we sit idly by and don't do our part to try to make things right and better.
And so I don't know specifically who he is, but I know who's supposed to be. you. We, the people.
I thought you meant me personally. I was like, yes, I'll take that
You
job.
would definitely do a better job than what we got right now.
That's not saying a whole lot.
It's supposed to be the people. The power is supposed to be in the hands of the people.
We, the people.
And so take the power that's yours, stand on principle, and do what you know is right, and God will give us the outcome.